let's say, despite the common knowledge in the market that price is the main reason why consumers abandon the cart, it's not. So we can definitely say for sure, we have seen from the data, we have seen from the AI, even when you model the user behavior and when you predict that consumers going to abandon the cart, price is not the main reason. So there are a lot of other reasons which actually contribute to abandon the cart. All the reasons are related to the decision-making process. So as humans, we're really bad at making decisions, pretty much, right? So this is a common known fact. And this is also seen and observed during the online shopping behavior. That's one of the reasons why consumers abandon the cart, right? So the choice paradox. Too many reasons, it's hard to make decisions. So what we have seen so far is that by building this AI models, is that consumer behavior needs more than 100 different variables that are collected from the consumer. And by variables, I mean not personal information, not historical information, purely clickstream data that need to be used to predict the consumer behavior. And the way AI works in this case, that it takes some variables, like, for example, how many times did you click this product? How many times did you go to the cart? Which prices did you click? These type of variables. And then as a result, it tells you, hey, this consumer has this probability to abandon the cart, let's say 80% probability to abandon the cart, or let's say has 0% probability to abandon the cart. Your behavior is not usual. It's not really a unique behavior on that side, So there is a pattern because the site has a structure. It has the same product for different consumers, the same pages, the same layouts, And because of that, also your user behavior or consumer behavior repeats itself. And it's similar to also some previous user behaviors from other consumers in the past. And you can in this case harness the patterns and be able to then make predictions. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Hello everybody, how are you? Welcome to another episode of The Link. I'm Diego Praderi, and today we're going to be discussing a very common problem for e-commerce merchants. We're going to be discussing about abandoned cart. And for today's episode, to be discussing about this very relevant problem, very actual problem that all e-commerce sites have, we invited Valon Shaffa. He developed a very curious and effective, I know he doesn't want everybody to call it tool, but he developed a very interesting engine, very interesting platform, not to recover abandoned carts. That's what everyone has been doing for a lot of time already. But he is introducing a platform, an engine to prevent abandoned carts. Hello, Valon, how are you?
Hi, Diego, I'm good. Thanks for having me here.
Please, it's a pleasure. So, Valon, actually, you being, hands-on solving that problem makes you kind of a pioneer, because everyone has been looking to solve how to recover the carts, but you actually went the other route. You're actually preventing cart abandonment. Is that correct?
That's true, Diego. So we've taken something that is an obvious fact that prevention is more effective and less expensive than recovery. We know that from healthcare. We know that from insurance industry. We know that everywhere. So this is like a fact. And we wanted to actually see if we can do something in that space, because everything and everyone that is working right now in this space is working on card recovery, which means that you send tons of texts, SMS, emails, you show a lot of ads to try to bring back the consumers who left your store without buying, but they still had products in the cart. So this is usually the standard approach these days. And in our case, we kind of like took a complete different approach. So we wanted to prevent the cart abandonments and see which one is more effective. And so far, we've seen that the potential is huge.
It's huge, right? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, if I have my numbers wrong, but almost 70% of all carts in the e-commerce world are being abandoned.
That's true. That's usually the average number. You can see it like similar and roughly the same across different sources. So as soon as you see different sources yielding the same or similar number, it really means that or confirms that that's the number. We also, from our data, we see the similar number, and this is a huge huge number when you think that a lot of millions and billions are spent into bringing consumers on the site. And then having the consumers leaving the store because of some minor issues that could actually be prevented, that's a big bottleneck and a loss in the industry.
Perfect. So, Valen, before we go deeply into the solution and into actually the problem that you're solving, I find it very interesting the genesis of Behemix because, and I'll let you tell the story, but you're mixing a very interesting, two very interesting ingredients. That's AI with behavioral psychology. And you did that together with your co-founder. But can you please share with all of us what's your story? Did you came from Albania to New York to actually lead one of the, I would say, the fastest growing solutions for preventing car abandonment? So tell us a little bit about your background, about the story of how Behemix became a reality.
Yeah, definitely. So I moved to Germany to live and study and do my bachelor's and master's. And during my studies, I founded my first startup. We're a big company, invested in the startup, a pre-seed amount of money, and then within 1.5 years we made an exit. So I was pretty lucky because I was just like 21, 22 years old. And I had an exit under my belt, which was a big deal. And then I started working at Google as an AI engineer. And then a few months down the road, I was constantly trying to meet co-founders to start my new company, which I was really looking forward to being something in the space of e-com and related to consumer predictions and the car abandonment predictions. And then suddenly I met my co-founder in a startup event. And my co-founder, he was just finishing his PhD in behavioral science, but with focus on preventing product returns. And we suddenly started talking about this, and we found out that our both backgrounds match a lot and fit a lot, because I also needed a lot this behavioral science perspective, but also my co-founder needed the AI perspective, because to prevent car abandonments and also product returns, you need to first of all predict that this is going to happen in the future and predict why the car abandonment is going to take place or product returns. And then you need to also think on how to use measures to prevent this, to take actions, because just prediction is not enough alone, right? You predict something that's going to happen, but what about the action here? And this is where the background of my co-founder comes in, because he has been working a lot on behavioral nudges and behavioral psychology nudges and how to prevent returns. And we combined our backgrounds. We pretty much quit our jobs in the very next week. This is what we did because we really found out that we had a great fit in our backgrounds.
So wait, just wait a second. So you met this guy, you've never known anything about him. You saw that you were a match because you complemented each other, and you quit your job. Both of you?
That's true. So we quit our jobs, both of us. We met on a Saturday evening in a working event. We had a workshop in the next day, so it was Sunday. We worked during the whole day. We did like diagrams and draw diagrams and different stuff on the platform. And on Monday, we quit our jobs. And one of the reasons why we did that and why we were like sure this is going to work out is that both of us, we had some experiences, good and bad experiences with co-founders in the past, So in my first exit, I was a bit lucky because the co-founders were a good match. But before that, I also started another like 1 or 2 startups, which they failed very soon because of this let's say, mismatch in co-founders' backgrounds and interests and let's say interests on moving forward. So when we met and then we found out that, hey, we're really interested, and we saw that, hey, this is a fit. So it was like based on the experience, I guess. And that's why we took the chance, and we pretty much quit our jobs in 2 days. So without even talking anymore. So yeah, that's what happened.
How long ago was this?
So that was like almost 4 years now, 3.5.
And where have you gone? From where to where have you gone with Behemix after like quitting your job? Like what were the next steps? How fast did it start moving?
So I mean, when you're all in something, you have no plan B. So that's what happened with us, right? So we said, look, we have some savings, both of us. we're not going to work. We're not going to have a side job, a side project. We're going to put all the focus in. And if you want to succeed, that's the only way to go forward. Because as soon as you have a plan B, it's not going to work. Plan A, it's not going to work, right? So that's what we did, and we were all in. So I personally started building the MVP because I was, let's say, hands-on in developing software engineer projects and also the AI part. So I built the whole project, and then within 3 months we had the MVP. Which, in the case of BHMX, the MVP is not. It's not just an MVP. It's not just like something you can click. Because in order for something to work in real time, like BHMX works, the whole system has to be completed, pretty much. So it was not an MVP. It was more of a product, let's say, beta version or something. So within 3 months, we built the MVP. We got a POC customer or pilot customer within 3 months. And within 3 months, we also raised our pre-seed round. So that's pretty much what happened within 3 months when you're all in.
Well done. Well, congratulations. Seems like quite of a journey. So Valen, let's go back to abandoned cart. Okay. So tell me a little bit what was the old way, right, of cart? Like you actually mentioned it on a high level, the cart recovery, and how does that work? And how did you actually found a solution that goes before that actually prevents? How were things done before, and how things are done now with BHMX?
So with the card recovery, there's like a standard process where as soon as the consumer adds a product to the cart, or before that, you show a pop-up, you display a pop-up offering the consumer a potential discount or a potential early access to new products or something to the service in exchange for asking their phone numbers or emails. So that's usually the process. And as soon as you collect this, and if this consumer who had added his phone number or email leaves without buying or abandons the cart, then you send them an email or a text within a day or within a few hours, right? Telling that, hey, you left 3 products in the cart. Do you want to come back? Here's maybe another discount, right? So you pretty much have to provide an offer on site to them, so that why should they give their email or information without you offering something in exchange? And then you still have to give them something in advance when you send the email so that they come back, right? So that's usually the process. The issue with this is you can see that you have to provide something, which is usually a discount, which means that you lose money right away on site. Like as soon as this consumer buys your product, instead of $100, you're going to get $80. And the other issue is that not all consumers, or better say up to 10% of the consumers, may potentially add the information, which means that you're pretty much not being able to cover 90% of the consumers who abandon the cart. So this is usually the standard process.
And also buyers that actually know how things work, so they abandon the cart on purpose to get that email, to get that discount, right?
That's a really good point, Diego. So when with this pop-up opt-in solution to recover cards started, like in 2017, 2016, this was very successful. No doubts about that, right? It was like a magic. Brands were getting a lot of millions out of that. But now, lately, consumers actually have understood the trick. So they actually ban the card on purpose, because they know they're going to receive a discount after a few hours or a day. So pretty much, this is not really as efficient as it used to be, even if this efficiency before was not at the highest level, because again, you cannot really target more than 10% of your consumers. So that's actually really interesting facts as well.
Cool. And what's the new way that you're proposing? Because that's, and I like to say like in this, that was the cure, but like you said, now you're giving the prevention, the medicine, right, to prevent that. So what's that prevention? What does that prevention look like?
Yeah, definitely. So we before we started coming out with a solution, we set up some requirements that this solution has to fulfill, right, or to meet, because I think this is really important with every solution you want to build. And one of the requirements was that we want to do it while the consumer is still on site, while they are still browsing online, right? Not like send texts and emails, and because this is a very crowded market. Even if here's like the the sad truth, Diego. Even if you build a real efficient solution to recover card, it's going to be really hard for you to make in the market because the market is so crowded with so many solutions that it's hard to maneuver through the noise in that market, But in the pre-checkout, or let's say on-site or pre-sale, that's a different story because it's a less crowded market. One reason is that it's a very hard market or experience to optimize because you need to have a very advanced AI or technology to do that. And this is why we wanted to actually focus on this on site, which means like the recovery. Second, we wanted to do the prevention. In this case, we wanted to do without providing any monetary incentives like coupons or discounts or whatever, right? And third, we wanted to do this without showing these huge pop-ups. Nobody likes pop-ups, right? So to be honest, the very first thing is like just click away or the exit and that's it. So these were like the three solutions. But in order to actually come up now with a solution that meets all these three different requirements, we needed to actually go back to the drawing board and try to figure it out why the consumers abandoned the cart in the first place. So we were trying to go and understand why the consumers abandon the cart so that we know to predict these reasons and then we can actually prevent this. And what we found out is that because the approach we took to understand why the consumers abandon the cart is also very new and disrupting way, because we were not doing it by sitting on the drawing board for hours and brainstorming with my co-founder and the rest of the team. But we were actually applying a very sophisticated technology that actually helps explain deep learning models, why they make predictions to actually explain why consumers are abandoning the cart. So pretty much within a few weeks, we're able to find and discover like more than 100 different reasons why consumers abandon the cart. And then also be able to kind of like predict these reasons. And based on that, then for every different reasons that we found, we came up with a behavioral nudge. So the nudge is a really small text information reminder, like useful note or whatever that consumers might need when they find themselves in a specific situation. For example, let's say a nudge can be in the office. Let's say, for example, please turn off the lights when you leave for home because this reduces energy consumption, right? So this is a reminder. This is a nudge that actually suggests or recommends consumers or people in this case to take an action for the better of the environment, for the better of themselves, for something that is good for everyone, right? So it's not a discount. Like in the case of discount, it'd be like, hey, if you turn off the light when you go home, we will provide you 20% discount or a salary increase or whatever, right? As you can see, this is not sustainable because you cannot provide 20% discount for something to take an action that should be a conscious, humane thing to do, right? So that's how behavioral nudges or behavioral psychology works in this case, or in this case also the PA mix. So we provide these nudges to remind consumers of actions that they should not take, because otherwise this leads to car abandonment. And what we have seen, the staggering point here is that we found out that, let's say, despite the common knowledge in the market, that price is the main reason why consumers abandon the cart, it's not. So we can definitely say for sure, we have seen from the data, we have seen from the AI, even when you model the user behavior and when you predict that consumers are going to abandon the cart, price is not the main reason. So there are a lot of other reasons which actually contribute to abandon the cart.
What can you tell me, like, from the top of your head, the top 3 reasons in average that people would abandon a cart?
All the reasons are related to the decision-making process. So as humans, we're really bad at making decisions, pretty much, right? So this is a common known fact. And this is also seen and observed during the online shopping behavior. So what we do during the online shopping behavior, we try to push the decision-making into the future as much as we can. So imagine you land on a page where you have, let's say, t-shirts. Let's say a page for t-shirts. And then within a page with t-shirts, you see like 4 different t-shirts or 20 different t-shirts of the same type with little differences. So this is the very first reason why consumers get confused. They get lost because they don't know which one is the right one. Again, the budget is limited. and they need to buy a t-shirt, but still they find themselves with four
The
different
choice
t-shirts.
paradox.
The choice
So many
paradox.
choices.
That's one of the reasons why consumers ban the cart, right? So the choice paradox. Too many reasons, it's hard to make a decision. And then what happens in this situation is that consumers, they want to push decision as much as they can to the future. And by the future, during the online shopping behavior, is like adding them to the cart. But instead of one, they add 2 or 3 different t-shirts so that when they go to the cart, they can make decisions. And this is also another big, let's say, a misconception in the market, that the cart is used to purchase.
It's a wish list as well.
It's a wish list, pretty much. So the wish list that we know, it's actually rarely used, which is also another fact. But the cart is used a lot as a wish list. So as a wish list, and also to make the decision later on. So pretty much it's like a short list of products that you want to make the decision upon them into the future, because again, it's kind of like hard to make a decision when you have like 4 different t-shirts on a single page. So when the consumers go to the cart here, because they added so many products, because they add so many options, they're still going to find themselves with this paradox of choice. It's going to be like they're going to feel suffocated because they have so many products. Again, still making a decision within 3 or 4 different t-shirts is still hard. And what happens here, there are usually like 2 different ways or let's say things and actions that can take place. One is, as we know, just abandon the cart, because let me think, or let me go somewhere else, or let me do this, or let me do that, or this is a hard tough decisions, and then you just abandon the cart. And the other, let's say, approach or step that consumers take, they say, look, I have free shipping. Let's say, why not I buy all of them and I make the decision at home? So now the decision making is moved from the category page of the product list to the cart and now to home. And this is where the product returns take place, because especially for fashion, product returns or product return rates, they are up to 50%, which means like half of the products that are bought on these stores, they get returned back, because there are so many options, especially for fashion products, like again, 4 different t-shirts. And then when you go home and just make the decision, then you can return that back. So from carts that are not abandoned, but they were supposed to be abandoned, they actually lead to higher returns. So this is where, let's say, the connotation of product returns with cart abandonments takes place in this case.
So from what I'm hearing, Valon, I actually think that you're going soft in your value proposition, because you're saying that you're preventing cart abandonment, but I'm hearing conversion rate enhancements. I'm hearing reduced return rates. I'm hearing a lot of other things that has to do with cart abandonment, but you're actually increasing conversion rate from the site if you prevent cart abandonment, correct? And you also are decreasing product returns.
Exactly. So this is actually a really good point too. So when we build this AI to be able to predict these consumer behavior reasons and abandonment behavior reasons and also product return reasons, we don't train we don't train the models to optimize just conversion rate or just average order value, because you know how it works, right? You can increase conversion rate a lot, but then you lower the AOV and vice versa. And at the end of the day, you're not going to get uplift in revenue. What we do instead is that we actually optimize or train the AI to optimize net revenue, which means that the dollar amounts that you as a store owner or brand owner get into the pockets after returns are excluded. After the returns are back and everything. So when you optimize this, the net revenue, which is actually the most important KPI for a shop or a brand, you have to optimize simultaneously or indirectly the conversion rate, average order value, and product return rate. So pretty much you need to increase average order value conversion rate, but also decrease product return rates. And this is what we're actually seeing a lot through a lot of consumers and brands that we're working with. So we see, like as an indirect behavior, we see like product return rates reduce up to like 8%, which is a crazy value, because 8% reduce in product return rates doesn't mean 8% increase in net revenue or in revenue.
Of
It
course.
means more than that, because for every product that is returned, you need to have an additional cost. So there is an additional cost. You have to cover the return and hopefully resell it, which is not
Yeah.
usually the case, because you cannot resell everything that is being returned. So pretty much you're losing money on that product.
Yeah, and sometimes even you lose the sale because it's not that
You lose the
they
sale.
they're not exchanging it for anything else. And tell me something. So, okay, so what you build is behavioral psychology triggers that are translated into messages. Okay, that those messages are prompt by that AI model that you build that decides what message to send when for the different profiles. Can you explain for dummies, right? How does AI work and how does AI actually decide what message to show and when to show it? And what are the triggers that actually indicate your model that they should trigger that message?
Yeah, definitely. So until so far, like until lately, a lot of what has been done in terms of like personalization, content distribution, sending promotions has been done around like segments, and segments are usually like splitting consumers into like different groups. And this split is usually done based on one or two variables. Let's say like, okay, consumers who have spent this much time, let's say 20 minutes on site, and consumers who have spent more than 20 minutes. This is like a segmentation way. The issue with this is that this decision or the consumers, cannot be segmented just on one variable, because the decision making or the behavior of the consumers is not explained by one variable. Otherwise, it would be really easy. So what we have seen so far is that by building this AI models is that consumer behavior needs more than 100 different variables that are collected from the consumer. And by variables, I mean not personal information, not historical information, purely clickstream data that need to be used to predict the consumer behavior. And the way AI works in this case, that it takes some variables, like for example, how many times did you click this product, how many times did you go to the cart, which prices did you click, these type of variables. And then as a result, it tells you, hey, this consumer has this probability to abandon the cart, let's say 80% probability to abandon the cart, or let's say has 0% probability to abandon the cart. So this is what happens. And based on this probability, which again is as a result of not just one segment, let's say 20 minutes or more than 20 minutes, but is as a result of a combination of more than 100 different variables, which are, let's say, collected from your clickstream. And this provides a very accurate description on what you're gonna do in the future. And this is for the future, right? Where you're still like browsing online, you still didn't make up your mind, but the AI in this case is very powerful. It can really tell you that, hey, what are you gonna do? And this is as a result that your behavior is not usual. It's not really a unique behavior on that site, So there is a pattern, because the site has a structure. It has the same product for different consumers, the same pages, the same layouts, And because of that, also your user behavior or consumer behavior repeats itself. And it's similar to also some previous user behaviors from other consumers in the past. And you can in this case harness the patterns and be able to then make predictions. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do that.
And Valen, it's very interesting what you're sharing. Is it possible to take action based on those patterns? So let's say Behemix identifies that pattern that you mentioned in the site. Can I, as a merchant, take that information and fix it from a site, even keeping Behemix that it's going to find another pattern, because nothing's going to be perfect. But can I do that? Can I get that and fix the site?
So the only way to have predictions or prevention in this case as effective as possible in place is that this whole process from you clicking, let's say, a product, this information is sent to the server, predictions are made based on the information, and then let's say behavioral nudges return and shown to you. The whole process that I was talking about has to take place within 100 milliseconds. If it takes longer than that, the nudge will be shown too late, which can have actually negative impact. So the goal here is like, okay, you collect information, you make predictions, you show the nudge, and that doesn't have to blink. So this shouldn't blink. When you refresh a page,
boom.
You should see it as native as possible. Otherwise, it provides negative impact. So this is why the only way for this whole solution to work is that all these different points are connected, and there is a pipeline, and this works automatically. You cannot actually do manual stuff here, because every consumer at the end of the day, has a different behavior. Like some consumers are on this page at this time and some are like later, and it's kind of like hard to do this, but the only way is to make it personalized towards that consumer and not like segmented like 20 minutes or more than 20 minutes.
Understood. And how do I measure the effectiveness of Behamex? Because like we were talking about, we know that it can increase conversion rate, but at the end of the day, you're looking at, and you're measuring the abandoned cart prevention. But if you're preventing something from happening, like how do I know that it's because of Behamex and not because of, I don't know, maybe more qualified traffic or other variables that can affect conversion rate?
This is actually really interesting discussion. Because right now we don't really have, besides A/B testing, it's not that we have other options. Let's say for recovery is easy to track the effectiveness, because you send an email, and if the consumer clicks the email, you track that, and then you see if they convert or not, and then you can put a price tag on the email, right? That's pretty much easy to do. But when you personalize, let's say that the user experience on site, and these nudges or this content is not clickable, it's not something that you can directly connect, then you need to apply A/B testing, which in short means that you split half of your traffic, your whole traffic, into the control group or allocate and control group, which means that they receive no experience, no nudge, nothing. They just receive the default site. And 50% of the traffic, they go to this test group, which means that they receive this experience. They don't receive the default, but they receive the nudges from you. Because again, it's not just one nudge. It can also be like a continuous process. You go to the category page or product list, you see a nudge which helps you for something. You go to the card, you get another nudge related to the card. You go to the product page. So it's like a combination of experiences that you see. And then what you do here is like you compare the groups. After a few hours or a few days, depending on the traffic, you compare the groups, and then you compare the conversion rate and the net revenue, and you find out, okay, how much money did I make on this group and on this group? And this is actually the only way. But it's crucial to say that A/B testing is when you split this in real time, because I've seen a lot of interesting testings in the market, which I'm not sure if you can call testings, but these testings, they go as follows. Manipulated number. It's not even manipulated numbers. It's a wrong testing, because for example, I've seen a lot of testing where they run the tool for like a week with the whole traffic, and then they stop the tool, and then they see what happens after another week, and then they compare these two groups. That's not testing. And the reason why it's not testing is that if you don't do it in real time, you cannot get all the trends and patterns simultaneously. Because when you split the traffic into groups randomly, which is also really important, you get both trends or all the trends in both groups. And what I mean by trends is that within the online shopping experience and brands, you have even like hourly trends. We're not talking about like daily trends. We have like hourly trends. For example, let's imagine a very simple case and question that I get asked a lot from brands. And they say like as follows: hey, but what about if I send an email at 8 a.m., with promotions and all stuff, and then the consumers come to the store, So this revenue is coming from the email and not from you, Behamex, or something. Yes, but if you do A/B testing in real time and you split the traffic randomly into two groups, all these consumers who come from your emails, they will be allocated equally on both groups.
Randomly, yeah.
Randomly.
So you wanna, Actually, it's the attribution problem that not even Google has solved. Everyone tries to, get attributed more sales than, I don't know, that maybe they should. But yeah, this A/B testing, I think it's really, you put black over white. It's really
exactly.
It's really simple and effective, I guess, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's the A/B testing is used. I mean, the A/B testing has been around, not like as an A/B testing, but like as a way of doing it, not with the same term.
Methodology. Yeah.
Since like I think 1100, like in this case, like BC, or yeah, AC in this case. So it's like for thousands of years, like 1,000 years has been around, and all researchers have been using this method. Even like this is also used in medicine to test new pills and diagnostics and everything else. So this is not something that is just around for like a few years with the
Yeah, of
online
course.
experience and
Not
everything.
with
So
the
yeah,
digital world. It comes,
digital
yeah.
world. That's true. Yeah.
And Valon, how can I what's the ROI? How can I measure the ROI of Behemix?
So BHMX offers a very interesting offer in this case. So offers interesting offer, and we because we are driven by innovation. For us, it's really important to have a motivation to innovate more and more and more because we see that there is a huge potential. For that reason, we also wanted to provide an interesting opportunity for the brands to use BHMX. So that's why we went with a performance based, let's say, offer or pricing, which means that if they see no revenue uplift from BHMX, then they own nothing to BHMX, so they don't have to pay any cents. There is no like need for installing the tool or like fixed fee or whatever, So like the paying fixed fee for such tools in a such crowded market, I think this is a dead method, I know there are like billion-dollar companies that they are still doing it. They're doing it because they saw we're earlier, right? Now, if you want to really go in the market, you have to provide an attractive pricing model for the brands to use your tool. And that's what we do, which means that we measure the traffic, we measure the uplifts, and at the end of the month, we see how much money BHMX made you additional, right? And if we made you, let's say, a few $1,000s additional, you pay as a fraction of that in terms of percentage. If we made you zero, which is not really the case, then you pay us nothing pretty much, which means that it's a risk-free pricing model for the brands.
And is it available for every e-commerce platform?
Yes, it's pretty much available. It's platform agnostic, which means that regardless if you run on Shopify or BigCommerce or you have your own platform, this is going to run because it has nothing to do with the backend, which means that it's also very easy to integrate. You usually integrate it as is integrating or installing Google Analytics. There is like a JavaScript snippet or a link of snippet, and you just drop it in your source code, and you're good to go.
And Alan, earlier today, you mentioned, I'm going to paraphrase it, but something kind of, it looks native to the platform. That you made a distinction between a pop-up and Behemix and how the nudges show that they look native. How do you achieve that? Does it require any type of design? Do you use templates? How do you make those nudges look native to the site?
Yeah, definitely. So looking native is really important because consumers, you want to build trust with your consumers, right? You cannot build trust with your consumers if you provide a third party tool or whatever, right? Or a third party pop-up or whatever. So for that reason, it's really important that consumers see this as native and coming from the store, which is actually coming from the store because they've installed pretty much BHMX, and this is part of that process. And the way we achieve that is that we don't let's say inherit a BHMX design or style or whatever. So everything related, like the font size, font style, colors, the design is inherited actually from the sites or the website's CSS design. So we don't do anything additional, and this pretty much makes the whole design look as native as possible. So that's one way pretty much to do it. Again, we don't use pop-ups. We try to be as non-invasive as possible. I think this is really important. So we try to show these nudges as part of the flow, for example, as let's say below the price or below the add to cart button or somewhere else. So this is also really important because if you add something that can be invasive, this can also backfire, which is really possible.
Cool. And before we leave, there's so much to talk about abandoned cart, but you mentioned a couple of misconceptions about cart abandonment. You mentioned the wish list. You mentioned how people use it to delay their decision. Do you have any other misconceptions about cart abandonment or how people use carts, the actual cart that you can share with us? Sorry to cut you off guard with this, but I'm very interested in understanding how we can destroy those myths, right? Because you get a metric or you get a quote like 70% abandoned cart or whatever, and that keeps going with time, and none of us kind of challenges that. So I'm interested in knowing, like, you went really deep with your co-founder of understanding the cart and why people abandon it. So if you can share any other myth or misconception, that would be quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, this is actually also an interesting topic because it goes a lot in the human behavior. What we've seen, what we know also, everyone pretty much, we have also seen that on the side that consumers are lazy. So this is a really important thing. And why do I mean by that? I mean by that because if you try to push the consumers to chat with you and text with you and do all this stuff, right? Or use your sizing tools to measure their whole body size and everything else, that's not going to happen. We're like really lazy as consumers, and at the end of the day, what's the point of going and enjoying a shopping experience when there is a huge effort? So that's why we're not like really surprised that chatbots didn't really take off. Like back in 2015, 16, everyone was hyped with chatbots and AI chatbots, and we thought that this is going to take over the world and everything's going to be different and all this stuff. Not really. And what happened is that it just backfired on chatbots. And now, even if you build the most advanced AI chatbot, consumers are not going to like it because now they have bad experiences with chatbots. So if you really wanna build something that can help consumers, then it has to be something that it requires as less possible as from consumers, because again, they are just lazy. So what we have seen also with a lot of payment methods, for example, let's go to the payment methods, because this is also another misconception regarding the payment methods and options regarding car abandonment. So let's say the common knowledge right now is that as many payment methods you add, you decrease car abandonment. That's not true. With everything that is added, it just adds another layer of the choice paradox and making the decision making harder. Because when you have so many payment options, like which one should I take? Which one is better? Like you're just adding another decision making on the way of the consumers. So this is actually a really, really important topic that everyone thinks that, hey, the more payment options you add, the lower the conversion rate is going to be. That's not true. There is a sell increase, but then as you add more and more and more, then this actually backfires on you. Because again, look at from your perspective as a consumer. You just saw, let's say, a book or a T-shirt, $10, and you go to the payment and you have so many buy now, pay later options. Why should I use the buy now, pay later options for a $10 book? Tell me. And we've seen also from the data, they don't use it.
It makes a lot of sense, and it reminds me. I don't know if you've read this book. I think it's a Bible for usability. It's called "Don't Make Me Think." Of Steve Krug. And you're describing exactly that. Users are lazy. They don't want to think. Give it all digested to them, and make it quick. And if we think about it, that most purchases, or at least most visits, come from mobile. I always think about that you're competing with a text message from your mom, right? So you need to make it as fast as possible, because you're competing with lots of nudges and notifications and apps and communication, your friends. So yeah, don't make them think, make it as fast as possible, just close that sale and try and get into retention later, right?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, again, like you have 24 hours of the day, let's say 12 hours working day or whatever, And then you can really actually limit this to very specific hours when the consumer has actually time to go without under pressure and browse online. For example, all the consumer or most of the consumers who buy or shop online between 7 and 8:30 a.m. in the morning, they're probably in the subway or driving a car or on their way to their work or school or whatever. It's the same story from like 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., you know? And then you have lunch from 12 to 1 or from 1 to 2, you know, you're not going to shop on that. And we have also seen this from the data because consumers, they buy more on the days or hours in this case outside these specific hours. So they buy a lot, for example, from 8 p.m. and they usually take more time because again, they're more relaxed and everything else, you know? So this is why based on the theory that consumers are lazy, you should actually put as less effort on the consumer's path as possible. For example, another, maybe the last one, misconception is that upselling is good. Upselling is good. It's really good.
Dangerous.
I don't doubt that, you know.
Yeah.
But everything
how people are doing
it,
it can be very dangerous as well.
Exactly. It can be really dangerous, and it also a direct relation with car abandonment. Why? Because this adds another confusion point on the user's path. Imagine, for example, I have one product in the cart, and I go to the cart, and then I see some products recommended on the bottom. It's great. You know, I have one product. Maybe I want to buy another one. I just add it. Great. I go and browse online, and then add maybe some new products, and add the third product. And then when I go to the cart, and I have 3 products, but I still get recommended, and maybe I get recommended with the product that is better than the one in the cart. No, I have to make a decision here. Should I really add another product, or should I not? Is this the better one, or is the one that is being recommended the better one, you know? So this is actually the word first difficulty. It adds another decision making. But
it works if done correctly, without challenging your initial decision.
Exactly. So this is actually an important thing. You have to know when to upsell. You have to know when to recommend, because there's a clear path here. The more products consumers add to the cart, the more likely they are to buy. But there is a catch here. After a specific number of products in the cart, let's say after 7, 8, or depending on the cart circumstances or depending on the probability, the more you add, actually your chances to abandon the cart increase, because you're not going to buy like 10 products. You know, exactly. Maybe you're going to buy, but then you return most of them. So this is actually a very, very important misconception that is out there, that a lot of actually brands, all of the brands are pretty much doing. They try to upsell as much as they can. Upselling is good again, but can lead to car abandonment. When and how? That's the important thing.
Valon, this is very interesting, and I'm sure that we're gonna have another episode with you. I would love to hear more about behavioral psychology, behavioral economics. I'm kind of obsessed with that. You know, if we consider that the human mind hasn't changed in the last 10,000 years, and we have technology that's coming and going like on an hourly basis, it makes it a very good topic. Also understanding how people buy with emotions first and then they justify with logic. That's something that I want to already pre-invite you to another episode where we're gonna touch on those topics. But yeah, we have time constraints, so we need to leave this conversation here. Can you please remind all our audience where they can get hold of you and where they can actually contact you or even use Behemix?
Yeah, definitely. They can definitely go to our landing page or website, behemix.com. And on this, they can find more additional information. If they want to get directly in contact with me, they can go also to my LinkedIn, Valon Jaffa, and then they can just reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk more.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Valon. We'll share all the links in the description of this video. That's it for this week's episode. Thank you very much for joining. Follow us on Spotify and all of our socials. And thank you very much. This is Diego Praderi, and you've watched The Link. Bye-bye.